matters of culture in the area of London called Aldgate. It's an amazing part of the city. It's very cosmopolitan. It has every kind of activity that you'd expect from an inner city area, which ranges from the financial engine of the City of London to an incredibly diverse cultural offer in terms of organisations. It has a very, very high population of students and educational institutions. And of course, it's a great place to come and shop and eat. It really does have everything. But we've been, as the whole of London has, hit by the impact of the coronavirus and also the changing demographics, the changing economic impact is something that we'll be talking about and seeing how culture might play a role in reviving this incredible part of the city. My name is Iwona Blazwick and I'm director of the Whitechapel Gallery, and we've been in Aldgate for over 100 years. We were founded in 1901 by a priest called Canon Barnett, who wanted to bring great art to the people of East London. And in 2009, we expanded to absorb the former Parson Edwards Library to have a dramatically increased number of galleries, but also activities. And before we began, I wanted to share my experience of the impact of culture in Aldgate, when on the 15th of July, having been closed since that terrible day in March, when the virus began to take its toll, we reopened the gallery at 11 o'clock in the morning, and I decided to come and greet our visitors. And we opened the door and there was a small queue, hooray. And the very first visitor who walked in, I went up to her and I said, "Hi, I'm Iwona and I wanted to thank you for coming." And as a gesture of gratitude, I handed her a catalogue of our exhibition, Radical Figures. And she took the catalogue and burst into tears. And so did I. It was an amazingly emotional day of people who'd been in social isolation for 4 months to come and meet not only other human beings, but also to be in a space of art, of real works of art, encountered in real time and space and not on a screen. So that was an amazing testament for me personally about the power of art and how moving it can be. So it's a great pleasure to welcome our distinguished panel of speakers here today. I'm going to ask each of them to say something about who they are and something about their sphere of activities. And I wanted to start with Maher Anjum, co-founder and director of the Oitij-jo collective.
Hi, thanks, Iwona, and thank you to Aldgate BID for inviting me to be part of this panel. I'm a founding director and co-founder of Oitij-jo Collective, which is a creative platform set up in 2012 to kind of support creative practices from the Bangladeshi diaspora and support more emerging artists to get a showcase of what they're doing. At the present moment, we are I'm leading the work on the Tati initiative, which is trying to set up as a social enterprise, working with local women, looking at the food sector, but also crafts and looking at crafts work. And we're basically trying to see how craft, culture, and creativity can be brought together at the local level and able to work with not just women of Bangladeshi origin, but with others. Because as Iwona has said, it's been a great difficult times for a lot of the members that we have been working with. And when we kind of did our first Zoom session in June, which was a revelation for all of us, it was one of those things like, God, there's more people out there. And just being able to do things and go out and do things is a huge benefit. And I think, we're working out of Artsadmin, the Toynbee Studios Cafe at the moment. And we welcome everyone to come and join us and support the initiatives we're doing and engaging more, so allow more people to take part.
Thank you, Maher. And that connects nicely with our next guest, Deborah Chadbourn, who's recently taken over the post of Executive Director of Artsadmin. Over to you, Deborah.
Thanks very much, and it's lovely to be here and lovely to have this chance to talk to our neighbours. Artsadmin is a 40-year-old organisation, and we've been based at Toynbee Studios, also set up by Canon Barnett and his wife Henrietta, since the mid-90s, a big refurbishment in the early 2000s. We have 6 rehearsal spaces, including a beautiful kind of Art Deco theatre and a cafe. And we're really a magnet for people to come into the area and make work. We work with a whole range of artists, mainly in kind of theatre, dance and the performing arts, and they produce work, they rehearse work, and then with our help in some cases, it's sent out around the world. We work a lot with particular local groups as well. We've done projects with Canon Barnett School and with the Kadir Collective. And now we're really thrilled to be working with the Tati Collective on their project, which is about food, and food being at the heart of culture and often people's experience of culture. As well as having an international kind of remit, what we are really interested in doing is understanding how we're connecting with different people in the local community and how that contributes both to our sense of place, but also to other people's sense of place. And we are keen that our building is more widely known and more widely used and more widely kind of visited by a range of people, both those who live and work in the area, but also who come in from further afield. We want to be good neighbours. We want other people to feel that we are good neighbours to them. And we want art and culture to be accessible to a very wide range of people, more so than perhaps has been the case to date in our building. We're also very interested in the idea of bringing international artists in collaboration with local communities to work on projects that they might co-create. So we're really interested in this notion of what it means to be a cultural organisation in an area as diverse and rich, both historically and also at this moment in time, because we figure it's a different proposition than perhaps the proposition rather has been before now. So part of our strategic work that we're doing this year is to really connect with a range of local organisations to understand better what we can offer into the mix and what we can learn from other people who live and work locally. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. I want to move now to Louise Conolly-Smith, who's head of creative at London and Partners, which is, as it says on the tin, a trans-urban organisation. Louise.
Thank you very much. So yes, London and Partners is the international trade, investment and promotion agency for London. So we are significantly funded by the Mayor of London. And as you said, we promote all of London, but that includes all 33 boroughs. So we are happy to be here today. It's always exciting. We're actually based just across the river from Tower Bridge. So it's very exciting to be promoting an area that I have been to a lot. And the sort of things that we do, we have a number of business support programs. So on the one hand, we help London-based businesses to grow, we help them to internationalize, and we also help overseas companies to come to London to set up. So that's a big part of the business that I'm in, but we're also the tourism office, we're also the convention bureau, and we also promote London to overseas students. So obviously in the current world, we're very much more about London and promoting London to Londoners. And there have been a number of campaigns called I Am a Londoner, which is about reassuring people that they can go out again socially. I'm sure we'll have worked with the Whitechapel on that, and probably Toynbee Hall, because we'll have reached out on behalf of the Mayor's office to a lot of partners to talk about how we can make London feel safe for the Londoners who live there. So happy to be here.
Thank you very much. And I want to turn to Ross Hughes. He's Programme Manager at High Streets and Town Centres Department, which is part of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets.
Yeah, thank you, Iwona, and thank you for inviting me to Aldgate as well. What a lot of our role is, part of the High Streets and Town Centres team, is to deliver the High Street strategy, which was released in 2018, which looks at a number of different high streets in the Tower Hamlets borough. In particular, one of the roles that I'm focused on is the Middlesex Street area. We recognise that there's a lot of shift and there's a lot of deprivation in these town centres, and we're solely focused on trying to improve the area through a capital fund that's mainly delivered through Section 106 monies and SIL as well. And through a lot of the works that when I've started in March, is there a lot of recognition that we need to tackle this a lot more briefly and a lot more quickly than we've had to, a lot more on the spot as well, particularly to a lot of the businesses that are there currently, who need to react a lot more quickly to dealing with the pandemic right now. And bringing in, how does culture fit into the area as well? So I'll be talking a bit about some of the capital programs that we're working on, some of the projects we're going to be delivering for the next 2 to 3 years, some of the immediate measures that we're putting in place to battle COVID-19 and help businesses survive along the high street, and what other measures we're putting in to bring people back to the area and reignite culture into the area by working with all the different communities that are within the Town of Hamlets area.
Fantastic, thank you. I'd like to introduce now Anthony Mellalieu, who's the Development Director for Urbanest, which is a very interesting, quite new kind of a development specifically for student accommodation. Over to you, Anthony.
Good afternoon, thank you. So Aldgate has been our home for 8 years, so not quite 100 years like the Whitechapel Gallery, but we've been on Minories now for 8 years, with a little building there that's home to just under 200 students. And that building in itself has been home to the likes of the LSE and King's College over that period. And wanting to expand our footprint within the Aldgate area, we are currently on site delivering a brand new mixed-use building just south of the Aldgate Square, next to the listed Sir John Cass building, running down Crutched Friars and Drury Street, which will be made up of 650 new student bedrooms, mostly let to King's College London, but also supporting David Game College just over the road from us in the Sir John Cass building. As well as that, it will have just over 50,000 square foot of brand new commercial office space, a really exciting incubator facility, so just over 10,000 square feet of space that will be directly for small business startups, as well as probably most uniquely, a brand new exhibition gallery centered around a large section of Roman wall that hasn't publicly been accessible before. So it runs along the same line from the bit of exposed wall you can see as you leave Tower Hill Tube Station, and historically has sat in the basement of an old set of offices. There's number 4 on the wall walk guide for those of you that do that guide, and it will be ready and available to see with a coffee shop attached to it as of next summer.
Fantastic, thank you. And now I'm going to turn to Andrew Stone, who, as of last week, was head of the School of Art, Architecture and Design at the London Metropolitan University. Andrew.
Thank you, Iwona, and thank you, everybody, and I'm very glad to be here. Yeah, I'm part of London Metropolitan University. We have been in Aldgate since we're dealing with dates and ages. We have been in some way as a predecessor organisation, either as a university or as previously the Sir John Cass School of Art, Architecture and Design, a part of Aldgate and its kind of different communities for, again, around about 100 years. And I think that deep-rooted sense of the particular identity of Aldgate, of its constituencies, of its constituents, is a really key part of what we do. Clearly, in doing that, we bring a large constituency to the area, with some kind of 2,000 students settled in a kind of building between Oldcastle Street and Goulston Street. We're a kind of key element in the kind of the local area, but equally, one of the things we've always prided ourselves in doing, both within our school and across the university, is how we reach out and work with, as partners, different parts of the community, whether that's business or community or local authority. And I think that's a key part of how we maintain the kind of, for us, the creative value and the creative responsibility that is important for all students, and particularly in the context in which we're working now. That sense of presence, of engagement, of working and listening with different groups is a really key part of what we do. And I'm looking forward to developing that further in Aldgate, but also in kind of wider kind of conversations as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, I'm going to turn to you first because architecture and design is an important part of what we understand as culture. Aldgate has an amazing historic fabric. There are many, many great heritage sites. And that's something I've always felt is slightly underplayed, you know, that there are some real masterpieces from the Hawksmoor Church to There's a kind of 17th century Lutheran chapel. But one of the things that is challenging about that is the road systems. It's very traffic
Yes.
and so on. And it's an area that has, historically, perhaps particularly on the east side, has struggled with resources because it was a much poorer part of the city. What do you think your students of design and architecture, how might they play a role in enhancing the culture of the area?
I think that's quite a challenge because, as you can imagine, because of because the reason we're here is it is a point of pressure within the kind of the cityscape as an area in terms of its infrastructure, in terms of its highways, transportation, population. There is a sort of a line, and there's a kind of frisson in that because there are tensions between different competing interests, different competing demands of business, of community, etc. I think the role of students is that they can get under the grain. They can actually be bolder in questioning, in challenging, in engaging with whether with business or with communities, because they're perhaps slightly more naive, slightly more open to testing kind of questions rather than the kind of politesse of a normal process. I think that brings a great value. I also think there's a straight value in asking if we can assist and be part of something. So that sense of partnership is really interesting. And if you've been into Whitechapel recently, you will have looked across at our old building at Central House, where we've just partnered with AHMM, the architects, and with the contractors, whose name I've just forgotten, I beg your pardon, to create the hoardings around Central House, which was a student project. And similarly, we've been working with Ross here in terms of the art trail, where it's both working to identify things, but as Ross was saying earlier, identify new things that might be brought to that. And similarly, when we were working with the City Corporation in Aldgate Square and with the Aldgate Primary School, I think as designers, as architects, as artists, we can make small-scale interventions. I think but there is also the chance to open up a bigger conversation about how the city is being used. And I think that opportunity of going into communities is probably more available to students than it may be to larger businesses, or indeed even to architecture and design practices.
I'd love to see them take a crack at how we deal with waste disposal on our streets, because that's another issue. We've got lots of small traders, we've got lots of public housing which has no, opportunity to have bins. It's an ongoing problem, Ross.
Imagine Ross will say something. There's certainly the kind of some of the conversations that have happened around the heritage, historic heritage, his high street action zone. I always get that one wrong. But also within the kind of some of the conversations, I think Anthony will be familiar with as well, as part of the bid conversations, has been how to address the kind of melee of street furniture, of signage, of litter bins, etc. And I think it's also that sense of how we seek ways collectively to rationalize a kind of that core infrastructure, so it supports what we do, and but is also done in a really effective way. And I know that Aldgate Bid and previously TAP looked at all sorts of ways of kind of utilizing kind of local organizations to get waste controls more tidily and presentably managed, rather than it being scattered around kind of the streetscape.
Do you think maybe I could bring in Ross and Anthony here, just to stay for a minute on the urban fabric of the area? What kind of dialogue do you think we could get between developers, the council, and the creatives? Is there a way of kind of joining up the dots?
I'll go first if you want me to, Anthony. But it's a good question, actually. One of the things that is quite unique about the team I work in is that we implement measures within the public realm, so we don't normally go through developers in the high streets town centres team. But what's really quite important, a part of our work, is the consultation and the communication we have with the local businesses, and in particular the Petticoat Lane market traders as well. And what I'm finding is that we are in a fabric in the urban realm which is very narrow, and it's very brick-like and very brutal as well, the way things are currently built. And we admire that from a certain extent from the way we look at it. But we need to expose it. We either need to expose it a little bit more, or try to locate more opportunity space. And a lot of the work I'm trying to do at the minute is speak with key local stakeholders, landowners in the area who recognise they either have vacant buildings or they have vacant spaces, which is where a lot of the fly tipping is a lot done. And if you go down where Petticoat Lane Market is, where New Golston Street is, there's a large vacant space as well. And we've been working with architects who are looking at the public realm, and we're identifying these opportunity areas which could bring in a lot more seating for people to hang around in these areas and appreciate the area more. Also try to soften it a lot more as well, but also use the streetscape as well, because there's a lot of either parking that's either not being used or it's being stretched in a minute, or there's a lot of footways that are wide and then they're narrow in different areas. It's not quite marrying up throughout the whole street. So it's an opportunity to try and put more parklets in the area and soften these parts that are really quite not very pleasant to walk through right now. And in particular, if you've been down there right now, it's very much a ghost town. So we need to try to work with what makes traders want to be there longer, and what would bring visitors back as well to go see these traders, or just come visit Middlesex Street Town Centre in general.
Anthony, what's your response to that?
Just to build on that and to answer the original question, I think it's our job as developer and client to anticipate those challenges 4 or 5 years out when we start with a blank piece of paper, and to allow Andrew and the architectural world to, via us, speak to the local authorities, whether in this case it be the city or town hamlets, to anticipate the challenge and come up with solutions. So not all developers will want to do that. I mean, we're fortunate in that we are an operator of our assets, so we have a long-term interest in not just the building fabric itself, but the public realm around it. And in the case of the development I discussed just earlier that opens next summer, we've agreed with the city in this case that part of Vine Street is going to be pedestrianised and tree-lined, that spills out from the Roman Wall exhibition. And also we've created a new public walkway that runs directly underneath the building, connecting both Vine Street with Jury Street. So all of a sudden, those pressure points that Andrew talked about that Aldgate is famous for, Vine Street was a rat run for taxis and white van men that didn't want to deal with the one-way systems of Minories and other streets locally. So the fact we pedestrianise that, hopefully for local residents and business users and occupiers of space that is, and it's tree lined, that's a big plus. But also connecting two streets, in our case Vine Street and Jury Street, we're trying to anticipate problems, challenges, and in the case of the Roman Wall, it's the city and no doubt our hamlets as well, aspiration to improve tourism linked to Roman history. So there is now a route through up from the tower to our site. And to get to Aldgate Square, it's now a lot easier because you can pass underneath, or you will be able to pass underneath our building, alongside a wall of glass looking over the Roman Wall up to the Aldgate Square, where there's the next piece of Roman history awaits you. So it's as I say, it is our job, I think, as the developer client to facilitate the direct question you asked. Make sure all the stakeholders are talking. I think we'd like to think we've done a little bit on our bit of Aldgate with the city corporation and local stakeholders to try and achieve an improved environment, which is safer, it's secure, and actually it's far more user-friendly than Aldgate has been previously.
That's another question, I think, about the student community that you house. How do we get that offer over to them? I mean, how does a young person maybe arriving from Korea or Sheffield get to know about the cultural offer?
It's a really good question, and ultimately we and our university partners is for us to make them aware of where they've landed, where they're now living. And there's some fairly negative perception around the student population, and we operate solely across London and in all different parts of the CAS and in London, and we understand that the residential community don't often like hundreds of students turning up on their doorstep, but actually students can play an amazing part in a diverse, rich community. And especially when you're then partnering with a university that also is taking a stake in the ground, if you like, in that particular part of London. I think it can be done. It's education. So we run lots of programs to get our students out of the building, explore the local, and I mentioned our building on Minories that's been there for 8 years now. We're forever saying, right, up there is Petticoat Lane, up there is Brick Lane, there's now Aldgate Square that's just open. The
And
tower, or obviously the gallery doesn't take. I mean, that's an easy one, because actually that is an internationally renowned landmark, and a lot of our international students, certainly in the art courses that a lot of them are doing with the UAL and other universities that we house, know about the Whitechapel, but they don't necessarily know about Petticoat Lane, about Brick Lane, and so it can be done. It's the onus is on us to do it, and we're always very keen, as Andrew knows, we've been a part of TAP for some time now. Wherever we're developing, we like to be part of that local bid or the equivalent organisation, so that we're fully sort of immersing ourselves. But frankly, we do that so that we can make sure that our students are doing the same in the communities they're living in. They aren't just a transient population that sometimes people perceive them to be, and they can actually do a lot of good locally.
And in fact, it is true of many university towns that there is a bit of a town and gown division. And I'd like to turn now to Maher, because you've spoken about the communities that you represent and the cultural activities, particularly of the Bangladeshi community. Could you say something about how you see culture playing a part in expressing perhaps cultural identities?
I think over the last couple of, there's a lot of culture and creativity within the community, but I think what has happened quite a lot over the recent years is, I think someone mentioned earlier, is the whole gentrification and access to opportunities in regards to cultural capital. So those who actually access the cultural creativity, and as you said, not only is there the gallery and the Artsadmin, there's a plethora of organizations and institutions and offers available. But on our doorstep are the communities who barely walk through them. You might walk through them when you're a young child in the local school, and there's a lot of interaction with community engagement and the education offers that happens through the organizations that's represented here and wider within the borough and in the city corporation. And that's great. So, the idea has always been that if you start young, then they will be more used to it, and then they will cross the threshold and they'll go in. But it stops at the threshold. The minute they go through, junior school, primary school, secondary school, they don't feel welcome. I don't know what it is. And the groups that we've been working with, I've been mainly over the last 2 years been working with women. And you will hardly see a woman, and I'm not just talking about the Bangladeshi women, the BME women, cross the thresholds of these organizations unless they are actively a creative practitioner. So the question has been, and that's why we set up the Oitij-jo collective, looking particularly at the Bangladeshi diaspora, is that I know a lot of people, I'm not a creative person or a creative practitioner, but a lot of my friends, family, and networks are. Where are they going? How do they cross the threshold and access the opportunities in these internationally renowned organizations? And as Anthony said, you've got students coming from across the world to be in London, to be part of, Whitechapel Gallery and UAL and CSM and Cass University, but those on the doorsteps wouldn't even know that it's in front of them. And I think part of our quest has been to try and understand of how you work at the local level. So part of the work with Tati has been that we haven't, by good fortune or bad fortune, however you look at it, is that we have not had one space to work from. That has meant we have begged, borrowed, and stolen from anyone and everyone to find a space to work from. But that has meant the women and the people we have been working with has gone all over the borough. Now, that's been actually a really good thing, because in that sense, we have worked at the Import Building, which is a gorgeous building in Mulberry Place, and working with Trilogy there. We have worked in the Artsadmin. We have worked in actually in the city, in the Green Building. We've worked in the Kobe Nozrel Center, Rich Mix. We've been working all over the place. And women who actually would not have actually gone to any of these places have actually done so. And I think that's really important to access that.
Yeah. Could I ask you, what would you say are the barriers to entry?
Not literally. I think one of it is just not knowing it exists. And so whilst we are in the cafe at Toynbee Studios, the women who are coming in to do the cooking, you're always getting a call, okay, I'm standing in front of the place, where is it? And so, well, if you're standing in front of the place, walk over through the green grass and it's on your right hand. And it's crossing the road and crossing over the green grass is difficult. Because if you've never done that, then you're not going to do it unless someone guides you through. And I think what we've been trying to do is to break down those barriers so that I would love to take them to Whitechapel Gallery and show them what there is, because I think they'd be amazed. And as Deborah said, there's some weird and wonderful things that's being made in the Artsadmin studio. So why can't we access that? Because we don't know it exists. If you don't know it exists, how do you go into it?
Okay. We're going to speak about communication a little bit later, and I want to bring Louise in then. But before that, Deborah, let's talk about the art. Let's talk about the culture itself.
And there's so much to pick up on.
What your view is, particularly with Artsadmin have a great track record, particularly with live arts. So perhaps you could expand on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd sort of like to kind of pick up on things that other people have been saying, and you know, this sense of what is it that helps people across a threshold? What is it that that inspires somebody to kind of explore an unfamiliar place or a new kind of which might appear kind of scary building, and just reflecting on some of the things that have worked really well for us to kind of bring different groups of people into our spaces. And the first thing that sprang to mind when Anthony was talking and Andrew were talking about students was the Chinese Art Now Festival, which we took part in a couple of years ago, and we're in conversation with them about a next iteration of that festival. And we and that obviously that's about promoting Chinese artists who are, you know, working in the field of live art, whose work is quite often challenging, and yet for the events that happened in that festival, which we helped to host, audiences were predominantly Chinese young people who would not usually come into our spaces. So in the sense of how we make our spaces attractive to visiting students, that's about understanding a little bit more about visiting students, where they're coming from and what they're interested in, and partnering with cultural and arts organisations who are actually working with artists perhaps from those different backgrounds. So that was a really wonderful opportunity to welcome different people into our space, and they felt comfortable because what they were coming to see was relevant to them and related to them, and they could come in groups, in friendship groups, to experience that work. The work was unfamiliar to them, but there was a lot that was familiar to them. And that's about that kind of proactive partnership that allows us to say, as we're doing with Tati, we were so thrilled when we had the conversation with Maher about what the Tati Collective were trying to do, because we have a kitchen. It's not currently being used, or it's being used a little bit. We had a facility where we could say to the women who are involved in that emerging business, you can use this facility, test out your ideas here, because we know that what will happen now is that those women will gradually be more familiar, more comfortable, and they have a peer group in the local neighborhood who will say, oh yeah, we go in there all the time, and that Manuel behind the bar, he's lovely once you get to know him. And you know, that sense of how we welcome people. For me, it's really about people. All of this is about people. Artists are great people for wanting to communicate what they do with other people. We're the in-between people. We make the opportunities happen. We can help reduce those barriers, because we're interested in how does somebody feel comfortable walking into a space that they have looked at from the outside, or not even noticed from the outside, and thought that it wasn't for them. And historically, a lot of people in our community do know about Toynbee Studios and about the theatre. During the open house initiative in September last year, we had people from the local community coming in and telling us about using the basement under the theatre as a bomb shelter. We had people coming in saying, oh, my granny used to come here for workshops because it was part of the Workers' Education Association, and that was a really important part of its offer. So it had an educational connection with people in the area. These are all things that we can not reinvent, but we can understand how to address perhaps the educational or the cultural needs that people in the area have. And then I think that then creates the sort of buzz with all sorts of different people coming in and out of the space that attracts and helps strangers and visitors to the area feel the vibe and the enthusiasm that local people have for those things. It adds to that possibility of welcome, I think, and it's really important. And as I say, some of the work that we do, we've had some really extraordinary kind of queer work in the building, and some really kind of quite extreme kind of performance art in the building. Different people come for those experiences, and they then connect with other people locally, and those local people can come in as visitors to our spaces, as well as visitors from the wider kind of area of London. So it's really about people. This is really about people and connecting with people.
I think also that the outdoor activities are really, if there is a sense of intimidation about entering the portal of these our organisations, that actually if we can take the art out onto the streets, that can make a huge difference. And we're part of this thing called Nocturnal Creatures, which is a one night only, a kind of nuit blanche idea about having artists out and making works in the public realm. Perhaps we could say something about the other festivals that Aldgate has, and perhaps could be more visible. Deborah, are you involved in that kind of wider network of the music festivals and the Winter Festival and so forth?
We're certainly involved in the Winter Festival, and that was a tremendous opportunity to engage both with local people and visitors to the area. We've also had an artist working within the sculpture trail that crosses the city and crosses Commercial Street, and that was a really interesting example of something where people can kind of engage with the built environment in a way that, looking at it in a way that they would not look at it before. And I think, we ignore the sort of outside and the built environment at our peril, because it is so eclectic and rich and diverse and full of surprises. Every time you go out for a walk, you'll see something different, won't you? So those are two things that we've been directly involved in. We have a couple of festivals, one festival that we run, which is a festival based on environmental change called 2 Degrees, that happens every other year. And we'll be doing some more work to promote that next year. And because what we really want to do is to get local people involved in opportunities to engage with arts projects that celebrate and address the climate emergency that we're having. So I think festivals have a huge role to play. Chinese Arts Now, we want to welcome them back to the area. And there will be other festivals that, I know that Maher will probably talk about Bangladesh Independence, which is next year, and that's going to be a really exciting kind of, and hopefully way of bringing both local people and visitors to the area together. Maher, do you want to say more about that particular celebration or opportunity?
Thanks, Deborah. Yeah, it doesn't take me much to start talking about that. So next year is the 50th anniversary of the independence of Bangladesh, and we are really, really keen to work with, there's no better platform than now to pitch it, to say, how can we work with you to actually really not just bring local people together, but actually take the kind of the artists and the creative practitioners and everyone else to the level, to the organizations that's present here and much wider in the area. Engage the students from all the accommodations and, you know, who are studying to come together with local, make it, you know, if we're talking about people, as Deborah is saying, then this must be an opportunity, like all the other festivals, to make an event of it. So I'm really putting it out there. Can we talk? How can we talk? Let's start talking to make something out of this, because, you know, whatever happens with the present normal situation that we are in, there must be something else we can do. And, you know, Oitij-jo is all about actually taking this forward.
Thank you, Maher. Actually, I'd like to bring in Louise now, because everything that we've spoken about is also related to local business, which is something that I know that you're anxious to support, but also to communication. And I wanted to get your response to this and how it might impact how we might work more with local businesses, but also how do we tell the world about what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. So one of the things we did, as I said, was our focus traditionally has been on an international audience. And obviously this year, because of the COVID pandemic, we really switched the focus and became, with agreement from the Mayor's office, and became very much focused on London and what we were doing to support the London economy and businesses in London, and to encourage people once we could in July to go back out. So as I talked about, we created what we called the Alliance, and we did that with the London boroughs, and we reached out to all the London boroughs, and we created what we called the Alliance, which was about getting people to feel confident to go onto their local high streets. It's interesting because I should think one of the things you will have in Aldgate, I know, Iwona, you were saying how people aren't necessarily there as much, but you have actually got quite a strong residential high street. And what we've also seen is that the high streets, the local high streets, have managed to survive. Whereas the central London area, that's where you're seeing this significant challenge. But obviously, as the promotional organisation for London, our role is to promote London and promote Londoners to be sort of stay well, stay safe. And so it was very much stay in your local environment, support your local shops. So we did that. We did an initiative. So firstly, we had the Because I'm a Londoner campaign, which was very much around encouraging Londoners to come onto their high streets and go shopping and to use the services that were open. We also did a campaign that the Mayor did and we supported, which was called Pay It Forward, which was where local, you could do crowdfunding. So Hackney Empire, for example, did a crowdfunding campaign where people could support Hackney Empire through the Pay It Forward initiative, and the Mayor would match fund up to £5,000. So I think something like, he put quite a lot of money behind it, and over 300 businesses have benefited from it. And this is particularly sort of the businesses that we've been talking about here. So sort of restaurants, hairdressers, sort of local high street traders. And then the businesses that London and Partners support tend to be very much more, I would say more tech focused, because they tend to be sort of, you know, one of the business support programs we have, which is called the Business Growth Program, is for people who are at least 3 people and are really looking for mentoring support around how to do VC, you know, to raise funding, how to recruit people, how to develop a business development plan. So we've got a program, and that runs, we recruit people onto that program every 3 months. So we just did our latest cohort last month, and we had over 70 London-based businesses join, and every 3 months we'll have another sort of 70 to 80 companies join. We also have another program which runs in a cohort model, but on an annual basis. And that's for London businesses who are looking to go overseas. So we have taken people on a virtual mission. So we have gone overseas to Germany, to China, to North America. So we did a mission with creative companies to Germany. We did a mission with financial technology companies to North America, education, ed tech companies to North America, urban companies to China. So we're taking all these companies. Normally we would be physically flying to these places. There aren't many highlights in a pandemic. one of the highlights is that when you do a virtual mission, you can actually do things that you can't do in real life. So we were able to go to 3 different places in America that you wouldn't have been able to do geographically, because we went to Boston and to Austin and to Los Angeles, which obviously you would not do in 3 days normally. Well, you might, but you'd be quite tired and you'd be spending most of your time traveling. So those business support programs are really important to us, and they're really important, and they're all about helping companies to create jobs. So they're all about keeping companies thriving and scaling and sort of representing London and all the best things about London. But the mayor also has business support program. He's got what's called the Business Recovery Hub, and they are running programs for sort of probably more smaller businesses even, and that's sort of 6 weeks of support about how you can get mentoring and sort of see how you can potentially look at other ways of running your business through a situation that's been very difficult. You know, particularly if you're in the hospitality trade, you know, there are so many amazing restaurants in London who are having a really torrid time. So, Iwona, I think you might be on mute. I normally do this.
I think also that, you know, we've seen historically over the last perhaps decade, the march of chains, you know, of small businesses not being able to sustain their existence because of centralized business rates. And the creativity that we have in our area, we know that there are thousands of artist studios, but also other kinds of creative designers, jewelry designers, fashion, gamers, all sorts of people who live and work literally within a square mile. And I think it would be interesting, Andrew, you've raised the idea that there are spaces where these kind of more grassroots organizations could sell their wares, because culture is also very entrepreneurial. I mean, makers, I'd like to see more visibility for makers in spaces that are not prohibitively expensive, and that maybe we do something as a group to slightly push back against the march of these huge multinational, very bland chains, and have more space for local traders, but also importantly for local artisans and designers.
I think you're. I mean, I think when at the start of the meeting, we talked about the conversation. We started about the kind of the geographical crossover, tension, whatever we want to describe it as, between in and around Aldgate. And I think perhaps rather than talk, you know, if we talk about tension as something that is a creative activator, then that is I think a really good focus to have. And I think rather, you know, like Ross might want to talk about the art trail here as well, because I think the sense of there is, despite its location, there is a significant part of the urban fabric which is publicly owned. There are also some very open-minded entrepreneurial developers who are actively looking to engage with the creative sectors and with smaller scale business. And I think we need to look at how we can utilize those different parties to both provide a base for and a showcase for the sorts of work that actually goes on in and around the area, because it is a very particular identity of where we are and what we do. And I think that could then become something that is, if you like, commercially extremely marketable, but you have a particular almost kind of hybrid condition of these different communities working together, some very long-standing and well-established communities for markets, the different kind of communities who have evolved through the area. And then you also have a kind of a business community or a student community. All of those bring something different to the area and each something very positive. And certainly as a school, you know, within a university which has had a very long-standing making tradition, you know, the London College of Furniture was one of our forebears, you know, so that's, and we have the kind of Frederick Parker collection of furniture within the university, which takes us back into the kind of 18th century. So that sense of a making of things, the artifacts, stuff, and that having both a cultural and a kind of consumer value, I think is something that we could really utilize as part of the presence of the area.
Ross, do you want to say a little bit about the art trail? Because one of the other aspects of Aldgate is this almost invisible divide, I think, between the east and the west. We've got the commercial road, thundering traffic, and on one side you have essentially office workers who are often commuters. They don't live and work there. You know, beyond Middlesex Street, they're people who will leave at the end of the day, have a drink, and then go back mostly to the suburbs. And then on the other side is a much more residential. There's a lot of public housing, but there's also quite a lot of impoverishment. There's, as we know, rough sleeping and so forth. Do you think your trail could connect the two? Do you think there's some way that this could be a way of breaking down that invisible barrier and getting more reciprocity between the areas?
Well, I just have to say it's been great to listen to everyone in the panel speak about some of the issues or some of the innovative ideas we could do, because that's exactly what we want this art trail to do. I mean, an art trail in terms of what in words is just trying to guide people from area to area. But what we notice through a lot of the Tower Hamlets area is that there are some unnoticed pieces of art, or there's some unnoticed pieces of history. Like we were talking about Toynbee Hall before, you have to go through, you have to cross the road, commercial road, you have to go down a narrow alleyway, then past Green, and then you're at Toynbee Hall. We need to be exposing these places a lot more and giving people some sort of wayfinding direction to show you where they are, whether that's a former piece of art by a local artist, which is what we would want to do, or whether it's new type of signage that brings people in. The art trail is something that Tower Hamlets have had kind of sitting with them for quite a while. And it's only till recently that we've started to resurrect the idea of what we want to do. And what we would like to do through that art trail is try to bring people into different buildings, in particular of historic significance, especially in the Middlesex Street town centre area. There's the university, we've got the old Jewish soup kitchen as well, which is just at the top near, I can't remember the alleyway's name now. In particular, when you talk about Whitechapel Gallery as well, because I met your colleague Luke, who took me down the alleyway, which is obviously it is in very poor condition and it's used for some business that is not of criminal activity, but it's a really great space. Now, what can an art trail do to bring people down here to try deter crime? I think it's a good opportunity to have artists put a local mosaic on there next to the old bookshop and the gallery as well, and soften the area. There are a lot of opportunities that link that Brick Lane area to come to the Middlesex Street town centre, which will bring pieces of art that are currently there back to life, but we were also exposing areas that have lost their way a little bit and try to bring them back to life. And that's where the combination of the art trail could come into these town centres.
Andrew, you've raised the idea that the art trail should not just be on the outside, but should also take people inside buildings. Yeah, well, I just think, I mean, in some ways, it picks up on what Anthony was describing with the Roman wall, I suppose. I think there is an opportunity, you know, there are certain buildings in our area which do have a kind of a quiet publicness to them. It's not always advertised. For example, the Whitechapel building, you can go in there freely, have a cup of coffee, etc. But there is a sense that, you know, many of the corporations and organisations, particularly on the west of Aldgate, will hold quite significant art collections as part of their kind of corporate investment. And I do wonder whether that sense of the exposure of that, or of those large-scale organisations being more, or so we say, philanthropic in terms of supporting new artists, new makers, new designers to show their work, and that becomes, whether it's as an annual ongoing one, whether it's an aspect of one of the festivals that we talk about, whether winter, summer, or simply an Aldgate art festival. There seems to be things that there is that would connect. You know, earlier Maher was talking very kind of richly about how do you get in? You know, there is the sense of the institutional barrier, whether it's education, corporations, etc. And whether those are established artists, new artists, students, school students, how do you begin to make visible what our area, our communities has to offer? And it seems like, you know, whatever device we can find, I think we should look at testing and seeing what we might be able to do. I feel I ought to also bring in at this point Sculpture in the City, which is
Absolutely,
an amazing initiative on the west side, and we're working together to see if it can come further east. And that is very much supported by all the corporations, the businesses that occupy the city side of Aldgate. Anthony, do you want to come in there just to say what you think Urbanest can contribute to this crossing of barriers, of making Aldgate perhaps more open to everyone?
Yeah, we're sort of very aware of the Sculpture in the City project, and it's a phenomenal thing. I mean, I think the challenge of, will people step over the threshold is something we recognise, and as it relates to the Roman wall, we've put 3 sides of glass around it. So if you don't feel you want to walk into that space, at least you can see it visually from the external vista on 3 sides, and also you see it in almost 360 degrees. So at least we think we've done our little bit in terms of presenting the opportunity for somebody to come in to what is a free to enter public space, or if they feel they don't want to initially, they can stand, they can view, and maybe then take the view to go in and experience it up close and personal. And I think we're well suited and well placed to assist with the east-west kind of the geographic point, because ultimately our residents are 24/7. They are generally 365 as well. So they are here when the city on the west closes and the eastern part of the Aldgate area is coming alive. So whether we know it on the ground or not, our students, our residents will be doing exactly what you just described, and splaying in all different directions, north, south, east, and west from sort of the western edge of Aldgate.
Could I just quickly bring in Deborah here, and Maher? Could we say something about what you think artists are feeling and thinking about what their creative future is going to be, and what role you think they can play in this part of the city?
So I go first. I was actually, we had our lunch session on Wednesday, which is a weekly session, and a young woman dropped in, and she knew the building because she has actually done stuff with Artsadmin and done creative practices there. And she said, "Oh, I didn't realize the cafe was here, because I'd love to do more work as as an artist, because that's what I do, but I can't actually do it." And I think for artists, I think that she was directly was saying is that I don't know how to go forward, because everything seems to be dead. Everything I'm trying, and she just felt struggling to actually understand where she can even start. And I think she's just the tip of the iceberg of a lot of people who's just like, I don't know what to do. It just throw hands up in the air.
And Deborah, what do you think in terms of content? What's the ethos of contemporary art in your area at the moment? What are the concerns and strategies?
What I think is really interesting, where a lot of the artists' minds that we work with are going, is towards much more profoundly kind of explicit, socially engaged practice. And this is work which still kind of formally and aesthetically is pushing at barriers, but is interested in the connection and the communication with local communities. And so we've got a number of projects in our pipeline which where artists who are well known in the field of theatre and live art are interested in working with local communities. And I just do go back to my point about activities, programme and people are what I think helps to kind of open up places, and trails are a good way of doing that, but really understanding how communities can contribute to what is on offer, what they're taking part in, what resonance it has to them. And I feel very sort of passionately that this understanding of working with local artists and local young people with international artists is a way of introducing new, inspiring, innovative kind of connections between people, which we will all benefit from.
Great, thank you, Deborah, for that final word. And we're now coming amazingly, the last hours just whizzed past, and I think there's a huge number of ideas and initiatives that we could develop from this. Most importantly, I think, is joining up the dots between our different areas of activity, our realm of influence as well, what we can contribute to this. And I know that Aldgate Connect Bid will be anxious to hear from all of you who've been listening. We'd like to have more ideas and comments and questions. And Natasha Miller will be able to forward, if you have individual questions for any of the panelists, then she can forward the details to you. But that just leaves for me to say thank you very much for a great discussion. I'm certainly feeling inspired, and I think there's going to be a great future for culture in Aldgate. Thank you.